Saturn, please give us the serenity to accept the things that we can't change. Mars, give us the courage to change the things that we can. And Jupiter, give us the wisdom to know the difference. It's the night of Saturn and the hour of Venus, and you're listening to Selene's Gateway. My name is Rev Dev, and we're here to talk about some astrology and tarot. And tonight, because of the inspiration of the moon and Venus coming together at the very beginning degree of Cancer and how beautiful that was, I'm going to share the Orphic hymn to Venus from the Thomas Taylor translation. And it goes as such. Heavenly, illustrious, laughter-loving queen, sea-born, night-loving, of an awful mean, crafty from whom necessity first came, producing nightly, all connecting dame. 'Tis thine the world with harmony to join, for all things spring from thee, O power divine. The triple fates are ruled by thy decree, and all productions yield alike to thee. Whatever the heavens encircling all contain, earth fruit producing, and the stormy main, thy sway confesses and obeys thy nod. Awful attendant of the Bermal god, goddess of marriage, charming to the sight, mother of loves, whom banquets delight, source of persuasion, secret favoring queen, illustrious born, apparent and unseen, spousal, lupercal, and to men inclined, prolific, most desired, life-giving kind, great scepter bearer of the gods, 'tis thine, mortals in necessary bands to join, and every tribal of savage monsters dire in magic chains to bind through mad desire. Come, Cypress born, and to my prayer incline, whether exalted in the heavens you shine, or pleased in Syria's temples to preside, or over the Egyptian plains thy car to guide, fashioned of gold, and near its sacred flood, fertile and famed to fix thy blessed abode. Oh, or if rejoicing in the azure shores, near where the sea with foaming billows roars, the circling choirs of mortals thy delight, or beauteous nymphs with eyes cerulean bright, pleased by the dusty banks renowned of old, to drive thy rapid two-yorked car of gold, or if in Cyprus with thy mothers fair, where married females praise thee every year, and beauteous virgins in their chorus join, Adonis pure to sing, and thee divine. Come all attractive to my prayer inclined, for those I call with holy, reverent mind. And I add that may Venus bless you with a pure heart and soul, that you can feel the warmth of love when you look in the mirror in the morning, when you look in the mirror right now. May you feel that harmonious pull of love and desire from within, so that you can cast those same rays as without. And so it is. And so it is. And I just want to continue to muse a little bit about the Venus Moon conjunction, because the path that we're on is leading us towards the retrograde in Scorpio. And so this is the third conjunction, the third Moon Venus unification of the 7 Moon Venus combinations, conjunctions that happen from evening visibility till the retrograde station. And so I decided to pull a tarot card for this. But before I get to the tarot card, I just want to talk about how Moon Venus, is such a beautiful course. And these 7 visible conjunctions from Venus's first visibility till the station retrograde in the evening sky really helps sow the seeds for what we're going to be working on. And I just want you to take a second and reflect on what Moon Venus means to you. Moon is our representation of our bodies, it's the representation of our mothers. It's so doubly, the moon is the body that we were in before we were born, and it is our own body. The moon is the last sphere in the Aristotelian construct of the universe and is the prism that concentrates all of the rays of light down to earth. And so often when we think of a prism, we're thinking about a rainbow because when we think about the way the prisms work is that the light is fractured through the prism and then into a rainbow separating the light. But the moon acts as the other way around, where it's collecting all the different colors of light and beaming it down onto a ray with all of those energies mixed together onto the earth. And that's, if you look through magical astrological texts and things of that nature, there's always a consideration for the moon. The moon is one of the most important things to consider when you're doing an act. And what a beautiful, image that is, that the moon is as much our protector as mothers are protective of their children, because especially in the Islamic literature, it talks about the moon softening the harsh rays, that the malefic energy of Mars and Saturn would be so much harsher if it weren't for the moon taking that on and that softness. And I like to say that as much as there's as much as we see one side of the moon, the rest of the night sky sees a fiercer, uh, more mother bear side of the moon. Because mothers do have that protective nature to them, or we would hope that they would, just as much as we would hope that fathers have that same sort of protective nature to them. And Venus is our representation of relationships and love and beauty and harmony. And you can see that in her cycle. And I recently, uh, on my solar return, I drew out the Venus cycle using sacred geometry. And it was just awesome. It was just really awesome to see how that all these different like shapes and stuff help define the understanding of the Venus rose. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up the Venus rose, and you'll find plenty of YouTube videos that show how, from our perspective, she draws this beautiful pattern in the sky. And it can be seen as a pentagram or a pentacle, a five-pointed star, if you will. And it slowly shifts, its cycle slowly shifts. And so this moon conjunction with Venus and Cancer is leading us towards the Venus retrograde in Scorpio, which only happens once every 8 years. And so it's a good time to start reflecting on what Scorpio means to you through the context of relationships and art and beauty and harmony. Maybe your natal Venus in Scorpio. Maybe your natal Venus in Libra. The Venus retrograde is going to start in Scorpio and then it's going to station direct in Libra. So these are two areas of the chart that are going to be illuminated. But every Venus retrograde is also going to affect Taurus, the other sign that Venus rules besides Libra. And it's also going to trigger wherever Venus is in your chart. Um, this is going to be impacted and felt more if you are a fan of perfections or know what perfections are, and you happen to be in a Taurus or Libra year, regardless of what houses they are in your chart, you're probably going to feel this pretty strongly. Um, I'm in a Aries seventh house year, and because it's my seventh house and Venus is our main planet of significations of relationships, then I too may feel this really strong. And I may feel it even stronger because I believe the retrograde is going to be stationing on my moon in Scorpio. So, that's probably why this like beautiful crescent moon conjunct Venus in tropical Cancer beneath the twin stars of Castor and Pollux. Maybe this is why, I feel so awestruck by it this evening. But then again, I just love the moon, hence the name Selene's Gateway, and also hence I love Venus and why the Venus rose is in my logo. These things are all very important to me. And so leading into Scorpio, Venus needs to find the emotional depths and may get fixated on romanticizing constructs that may or may not be healthy. Um, However, it can also be a place where Venus finds very personal, structured, security based ways of relating with people. You know, we might find curiosity in BDSM during the Venus retrograde in Scorpio. And what a beautiful expression of intimacy and trust and security and faith that we find in that community. But all in all, you just want to be thinking about being observant. I always say that the astrologer's number one tool is observation, quiet, contemplative observation. You know, the belief systems that were astrologically informed came up with things like Buddhism and Hinduism and Stoicism. There's ways of being and acting and receiving the world that are helpful and harmful to yourself. And one of those is by freaking out. And what I mean by that is allowing our tides to be pushed and pulled by the idea of what could happen. And I've said this before, but fear and optimism come from the same place, and that's the unknown future. And so now is a good time to be aware and observant of your relationships and also just honest and truthful with the people that you care about and are around you. But what I mean by truthful is truth that is expressive of how you personally feel about things instead of letting them slide and not saying things that are not. I'm not talking about expressing yourself as in like kicking up the dust, kicking up the fires and coals wherever you can. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being aware of when you're allowing slights to take place. It's a good time to start measuring your boundaries and making them clear. It's always a good time to do that, but especially when Venus is about to retrograde in Scorpio, because Scorpio is a very protective, security functioning, emotional based sign. And Scorpios can allow their energy and their emotions to fester and build resentment if they don't process them, if they don't speak them out loud. This can cause, the boiling over effect. And so it's just a good time to assess and be clear about your boundaries and order your perspective on your relationships, your friendships, your professional relationships, your acquaintances, maybe new friendships, new relationships. Every Venus retrograde tests the relationship sphere, but it's also a great time to make art. And one of the things about the Venus retrograde in Scorpio that is artistic that I find interesting is that the retrograde cycle slowly moves from sign to sign. And the retrograde cycle, or the story that is kind of associated with this Venus retrograde in Scorpio, is part of the Wizard of Oz. Uh, and specifically the Wicked side of the Wizard of Oz. The Wicked novel, or I should say, the Wizard of Oz itself, was part of a Venus retrograde cycle that was in Sagittarius. So the original books, the movies, stuff like that came out during and was made during the Venus retrograde cycle in Sagittarius. Well, when that cycle slowly shifted because it retrogrades uh, through the zodiac very slowly. Well, that Venus retrograde stopped stationing in Sagittarius and started stationing retrograde in Scorpio. And it's around then, or it's in one of those cycles, when we get the wicked side of the story. So you get this like very adventurous Sagittarian story about a girl from Kansas like being dropped in a very Sagittarian way, just in the middle of a new adventure. And she goes about it and makes a bunch of friends along the way and goes on an adventure. And then we get to the Venus retrograde cycle in Scorpio, and then we get to find out about the quote unquote villain of the story and get to see more about her side of things. And I guess why I'm bringing this up because is if you're a creative type and you like to write or paint or draw or make video games or whatever you like to do that's creative, this it's also a good time to like explore the depths of those emotions. What are the storylines being written? Now we have this we've for a while, but now we have this story to work with where Venus stations retrograde in this deep emotional security based like space of Scorpio, and then she emerges in the land of Libra, of harmony and justice, of you know being more friendly and open. And like, what is that unveiling? What is that process like? How do you go from those depths of Scorpio into this more classically dignified space of Libra? And what does that feel like? So, those are the types of stories to start like thinking about in your mind. And the tarot card that I pulled for this talk is the devil. And it's interesting too because this is the Queen of Hearts of the Alice in Wonderland story. And it's a good time. The devil reminds us to be aware of the bondages we've chosen, the contracts we've signed, and the details that we're finding out about those. Are they the contracts we want to be holding on to? Are are they the bindings that we want to utilize? Are we happy with these contracts, with these decisions, with these places that we exist in? Is it what we thought it was, or did we get tricked by the devil being in the details? And that part of that saying is describing the too good to be true, like fantasy that we can get enraptured by. And the question is always, uh, do we still have agency? Do we still have the power to loosen these bonds and step away from the world that we're currently in? And for me personally, this was a big deal, because I had to become aware of the of bindings, being bound by alcohol. That's why I start with the serenity prayer. Like, I was choosing alcohol over the rest of my life, and I needed to make a different choice. And so I have been. And also, the other reason why I start with the serenity prayer is because I really think that it's a good astrology prayer, just to be clear, because just because we know astrology doesn't mean that we can control astrology. And that's why I really like the idea of the serenity prayer as an astrologer's prayer, because it starts out saying, accept the things that we cannot change. First of all, we can't change the cycles of the stars or the seasons or anything like that. We can change how we approach them, we can change how we perceive our life through them, but we cannot change them. So we have to accept that. And once again, back to observation is the best tool of an astrologer. And then Mars as the courage to make the changes that we can change. This takes us back to the bindings of contracts and the choices we make. The only thing we can ever really do is choose and make choices about what we're experiencing, where we are, when we are, how we're doing it, when we're doing it. We get to make those choices, and we have to make the courage to make different choices in order to get different results. And then Jupiter gives us wisdom and can hold both ideas of the things that we can't change and the things that we can. And so that's why we look to Jupiter for guidance and the wisdom to know the difference. But so this moon conjunction with Venus in the lovely zodiac of Cancer, we have the time and space to nurture our emotions, to begin new ones, and to assess the relationships that we're in and how they're making us feel. Do we feel nurtured? Do we feel content? Do we feel happy? Or are we allowing micro incisions on our boundaries and on our needs and our necessities to start to corrupt our hearts? And that's why I like that the Queen of Hearts is depicted as the devil card in this deck of the Journey of Oz and Wonderland. So, my challenge to you, dear listener, is to take a breath, feel deeply into your heart, and at the very least, look in the mirror and say, I love you. Because in order to find true love and happiness, you first need to work on loving yourself. May the fire inside guide you.